Fed member Williams had a few choice comments this morning about interest rate cuts, maybe even how restrictive we are, how many basis points we should be going down, and we just had a pretty big spike on the 210 curve. Is that because the Fed is setting up for rate cuts, or is it a sign of something more? Let's break it all down right now. First, Fed Williams was asked about Lisa Cook. No comment on Lisa Cook. Immediately after he says he has no comment on Lisa Cook, who comes out with a comment? Kevin Hassett. Kevin Hassett tells us that the honorable thing for Lisa Cook to do would be to step down. As in, historically, usually when there's controversy around a Federal Reserve member, you end up getting Fed members stepping down. This is what happened when Clarita had allegations against stock trading against him, or multiple others had allegations of stock trading against them that had maybe suspicious or questionable timing. Usually when there's anything sus with Fed members, they just step down. And I think Donald Trump, to some extent, knows that. He knows, all right, if I light the fire, then maybe they'll step down. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's Lisa Cook who's the first one being stubborn. But if you think about it, it's actually Jerome Powell who's really dug in his heels, and Powell benefits a little bit more from immunity than other bankers like Lisa Cook. Keeping in mind that Donald Trump is now also honing his insights, not just on the Fed board, but also the individual regional banks who aren't going to be voting members. Every single year, we have some regional bank presidents who aren't voting members. And Scott Besson is interviewing new Fed members right now, and there's reporting that suggests the Trump administration is basically not just looking for a Fed chair replacement, but they're trying to replace as many people as possible at the central bank to get us to where we have basically a Trump central bank. And I think Lisa Cook, to some extent, sees the stubbornness of Powell and this change that the Trump administration is trying to force at the Fed. And she's throwing up her hands and saying, you know what? We're going to fight this, because if I don't fight it, nobody's going to fight it. Now, obviously, for her to fight it, she has to believe that she did nothing wrong with her mortgages. Now, her mortgages looked sussy baka, but let's just say there's a possibility that she had some kind of secondary agreement in writing that one of these homes was a second home, or some kind of secondary agreement that the lenders were aware that she had two primaries at the same time. It's possible. Now, if she had something like that, I'm surprised we haven't seen it yet, because that would be just such an easy thing to put this to rest. A statement from Lisa Cook going, hey, this was the second home and the lender knew about it, would put this to rest really dang fast. We haven't gotten that yet. That doesn't prove her guilty, but it does raise some questions. That said, a lot of people are wondering, is the 2-10 spread spreading because of this Lisa Cook drama, because rates are going to normalize, or is there something worse happening? When you look at the 10-2 spread, anytime you are above 50, you are shock prone. Shock prone means you're closer to the potential R word taking off, recession. Take a look, for example, at just specifically the 2-year yield. And when you look at the 2-year yield, what you'll find is the 2-year yield tends to trend down and then plummet right before recession. That happened in 2000, and it happened in 2007. And of course, it happened during COVID. The 2-year is the first thing to plummet. That said, the 2-year also slipped down during the soft landing of 1995, although the 2-year never went below a rate of 4.3 in 1997. So 95, sure, it normalized down a little bit, but it never went low. Right now, we're sitting at about 3.6. We're trending down, and right now we're at Liberation Day levels on the 2-year. Now, is that because maybe markets are pricing in this is where neutral should be? Fed Williams tells us maybe. Fed Williams this morning suggested, when he was asked about his own personal formula for where the neutral rate is, he was asked, hey, we might be 60 to 100 basis points restrictive based on your own formula for where Federal Reserve policy rate should be. And Fed Williams replied and said, yeah, you're right. Like, the math of that is right. The world is more complicated than just one formula, but the math of that is correct. Maybe we are 60 to 100 basis points restrictive. Maybe that's what's moving the 2-year yield down. But look at this. The 2-year yield is down 2.5 basis points while the 10-year is actually up. Now, sometimes that could be a concern that, hey, in the near term, we're going to get some rate cuts, but those rate cuts could actually spawn some stagflation. Usually when you see recessionary pricing in the bond market, both of these go down because markets expect that rates are going to fall rapidly in a recessionary environment. Even the 10-year plummets. So when you have this divergence, it's usually because markets think, all right, the Fed might actually be setting up a stagflationary problem. Unfortunately, that increases the cost of capital for small businesses, and that could be the very thing that eventually pushes us into recession. Now, everybody's been talking about recession for a while, but remember that small businesses make up about half of employment in the country. So when this 210 spread widens, it actually affects people. And you'll notice that today, the 210 spread is higher than it was during liberation. When we got liberated, the 210 spread went from 30 basis points to 50, which is shock prone level. I call it shock prone because shock means we're over 1. Once we go over 1, we're getting into more 2007, 2000 recessionary territory. We just shot up from this level where we've been bouncing around in 50 to 63. That could be because of Lisa Cook. It could be because people are pricing in that September rate cut, or it could be that early warning sign of a recessionary signal. Now, hopefully today, Nvidia absolutely spanks. That's our hope. Because I'm going to give you a heads up on what happens if Nvidia doesn't spank, okay?
Let's be real. The big phone carriers are ripping people off. Over $100 a month for a phone service that barely improves year after year. Nuts. That's why I'm excited about today's sponsor, Helium Mobile. Remember to use my information in the description down below so you can join. They're completely changing how wireless works. You can get an actual phone plan for free. It's called their Zero Plan. You get 3 gigabytes of data, 100 minutes of talk, and 300 texts, no contract, no credit card, no nonsense. Personally, I think this is the perfect plan for like a 2FA plan in case you need one of those. Like, you have your main number that everybody knows, but then you have a second number because most phones let you have 2 phone numbers on now, sometimes even more. So you put on a second number, use that for your 2FA. Come on, easy way, and you get to try out the service. But anyway, here at Helium, no contracts. No credit card needed for the Zero Plan. You don't need a new device. You don't need a new number if you want to port over an existing number, or if you want to add a new number, you can do that as well. And here's the kicker. Helium Mobile is the only phone plan that pays you back. They've built a reward system called Cloud Points. It sort of works like credit card points or airline miles. You earn them for just using your phone, and then you redeem them for gift cards at brands like Amazon, Apple, Starbucks, Target, or even nonprofits like St. Jude's or Doctors Without Borders. If you need more data, you can also upgrade to their Air plan, which is about $15 per month, or the Infinity plan for $30 per month with unlimited everything. Still way cheaper than the big guys. And coverage? No worries. The cool thing here is you get T-Mobile's 5G Plus, Helium's own community-powered network, kind of like the Airbnb of telecom. That's how they keep it reliable, affordable, and yes, even at one level, totally free. You can sign up by downloading the Helium mobile app down below and make sure to use code KEVIN. Stop overpaying for phone service and join Helium.
Let's put it this way. If Nvidia doesn't spank, you could potentially immediately usher in a recession. Now, I'm not saying that to try to be, a recession bear or something. It's simply to say that Nvidia is probably the only thing propping up our GDP right now. What that means is, GDP is about $26 trillion. GDP growth is probably only about 1%, right? So that's about $260 billion. Okay, well, $260 billion, I mean, that's probably just the AI sector alone. Spending basically a delta of an extra $260 billion on CapEx this year compared to last year, which means pretty much 100% of our GDP growth is coming from artificial intelligence. And I don't know when the day is going to happen. I don't think it's going to be today. I hope it's not today. But if Nvidia shows a slowdown in AI, people are going to rush for the exits on the AI trade. And that could self-fulfill a correction. A correction leads to layoffs, which puts you into shock territory and there's recession. So Nvidia is literally economically vital today. At the same time, Williams tells us this morning that the economy is going through a, quote, adjustment process, and that he expects GDP growth will continue to slow, that on a whole, GDP will grow 1 to 1.5% this year, but it'll continue to slow, which is not great. We don't want to hear that. He also suggests that, yeah, look, hiring isn't doing great. Part of that is obviously because of immigration in terms of labor supply, but yes, hiring is also slowing down. And he says the place to watch is going to be unemployment claims. Now, in my opinion, just studying history, once unemployment claims go, it's over. Like, you may as well take yourself a DDS. That would be a poison-tipped dragon dagger. Can't even get a good shot of that in the camera here. Look at that. Poison-tipped, there we go. Poison-tipped dragon dagger coffee mug. You know, everybody's got to get one of those. If you can actually get the camera to focus. There we go. Look at that. So you take one of these and just stab yourself because it's just bad. No, don't do that. Okay, no, self-harm is bad. There's always hope. Okay, everything's gonna be okay. But the point is, once unemployment claims go, it's already too late. Like, that's my point of view. But hearing Fed Williams talk about it, I'm like, man, could you be talking about anything more lagging? That always makes me nervous that the Fed just ends up keeping rates higher because they look at these data sets that are ridiculously lagging. But in fairness, Williams also kind of threw up his hands, and he was very transparent about this idea of, hey, like, we just don't know. Like, we haven't been in a place where, like, we actually just closed the door to immigration. Like, who knows what labor growth is going to actually end up being? We really just don't. So how do we know if we're at maximum employment when we don't have a precedent for this? That's not great because it just means things got even more foggy for the Federal Reserve. In other words, more blurry, right? They're trying to land the plane, but now they could see even less. Fed Williams also says that progress on inflation is very slow. It's hard to separate out the tariff impact. He actually thinks the tariff impact on inflation is probably around 40 to 60 basis points. Now, that's unfortunate. See, because if it weren't for tariffs, we'd probably be, 100 basis points lower on the Fed yield curve or the Federal Reserve rate right now, which means, calls on TLT would be doing really well. But tariffs absolutely screwed it by delaying everything and causing fear of lasting stagflation, and they basically increased your cost of time, which sucks. But it is what it is. So Fed Williams hopes that despite this tariff inflation, over time, the Fed is going to be in a place to get those rates down. Fed Williams says we don't want the labor market to weaken too much, but we want inflation to go back to 2%. This is him acknowledging that, hey, we are in a restrictive territory of interest rates. We just have to be careful because we don't want the labor market to weaken. But is what we're seeing weakening, or is it because of immigration? So that's the concern, that the Fed would make a mistake. And this is why I've been worried that Powell was going to stay fussy and not set up a 25 basis point cut, because it just begins to kind of confirm that we're going to end up going into a recession. Fortunately, Powell didn't do that. Powell brought back flexible inflation targeting, minusing the average to, cover his mistake the last time. And now we're hoping that the Fed does the right thing and sets up continuous rate cuts. Current pricing for rate cuts, we've got a 90.7% chance that we're going to get a rate cut in September. Remember, September 5th, we have a jobs report. That's going to be huge. If we could get a positive Nvidia read now, we go to all-time highs. If we can get a positive jobs report and we actually get this 80,000 jobs growth that we're expecting, we could boom over 600 on the Qs. I mean, it'll be the most bullish catalyst we've got. That's our latest coupon code, by the way, for the Meet Kevin Alpha report. Somebody wrote this morning in the course member live, Kevin, thank you. Your calls on Palantir, paid for the course I literally bought on Friday. He literally, spent $1,400 using the coupon code and getting into a course, paid for it within the first, 2 trading days of owning the product. That's incredible. I hope that for everybody. I can't guarantee that, obviously, for everybody. But people have been very, very happy with what we're doing. We just released 2 more of our top 10 buys for the next 10 years. Obviously, those aren't personalized financial advice for you. I don't know what your portfolio or your situation is, but they're like, my 10 buys that we just buy and hodl for at least the next 10 years. And so we're on number 4 now is the next one coming up. But anyway, then of course after the 5th, we'll have, which is the jobs report, we'll have our, readout of QCEW numbers on the September 9th. We do have a catalyst this Friday. I think it matters a little less, but it is PCE. PCE 5:30 to 2 days from now in the morning. You're expecting a 0.2 on the month over month and year over year 2.6, core 0.3, core year over year 2.9. Nobody really cares about PCE as much because even though it's the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, you could derive what that number is going to be by pulling out the components of CPI and PPI. So usually we're not too far off on the estimates. Usually it's not a big shocker, and you're not in a place that it's really a big catalyst. Just like second quarter GDP estimates, second revision of the second quarter GDP estimates for tomorrow, which are expected at 5:30 a.m. to come in at 2% for the second quarter, which is actually pretty good. Tariff second quarter 2%. That's great. That's not really a market mover or a catalyst. That said, we could look at the Atlanta Fed real GDP numbers, and from an Atlanta Fed real GDP numbers set, there's no problem with the economy. Things are still booming. Let's go take a peek at that. So here is the Atlanta Fed. Our last read is 2.2% on August 26th yesterday, and that's great. That's fantastic. Most people think we're trading around 1% on GDP. The Atlanta Fed's like, nah, man, we're doing great. Why? Because they say the nowcast for real gross private domestic investment growth, even though that decreased, where's their upside? Oh, no, both of these are negatives. Oh, wow, that's actually bad. Look at this. The nowcast of third quarter real gross domestic investment growth decreased from 4. Oh, no. Okay. Decreased from 4.9% to 4.4%. Oh, okay. I thought those were both negative numbers. No. This is actually fine. So, yeah, I mean, 2.2% on GDP because they still see a lot of real investment growth. People spending on appliances, people buying stuff for their homes. I think a lot of this, and we've seen this in the capital goods orders numbers that came out yesterday as well. That's probably why the Atlanta Fed numbers revised yesterday, because we got the capital good orders. It's probably because, here, let me explain something that I think is unique. It is a near term bullish catalyst, but it does create some potential issues. I'll explain. Just let me take a sip from my poison dragon dagger drink here. What you probably have is a lot of people still pulling forward tariff concerns. Appliances like, hey, honey, we should buy a new washing machine now or a new dishwasher now because, we don't want those tariff prices to show up. I think a lot of that is still happening, especially with BNPL built into like everything. I mean, I booked some tickets to take the kids on a family trip this weekend because it's Jack's birthday. He's turning 10. It's remarkable. Jack got a Nintendo Switch 2 for his birthday, and so a Nintendo game system. For my 10th birthday, I got the Nintendo GameCube. So I'm like, oh, this is crazy. Like, we both got Nintendo systems for our 10th birthday, and it's just weird because, I'm 23 years older than him. That's crazy to say. So anyway, we'll have a good vacation, but every single time you go check out for something now, it's like, hey, do you want to pay for this in 12 monthly payments? I'm like, no, I'm just gonna pay for it. Like I don't want any debt. Other than real estate debt. Real estate debt's good. I don't want any debt. Hashtag doesn't even have real estate debt, which is like an irony, but whatever. That'll change over time as rates come down. Housing, I think, will boom. I think Warren Buffett is making the same bet, right? Warren Buffett throwing money into Lennar or Pool, which is a wholesale supply company for people renovating their homes or building more pools. It's clearly a Buffett bet on real estate. But that said, there is some pull forward here. And that's probably what we're still seeing when we look at these capital good shipments and orders and real private domestic spending growth. If I look at orders versus shipments on the data yesterday, I could tell you yesterday we had, let's see here, capital good orders actually beat the shipments. So it's like that enthusiasm's still happening. Shipments came in at 0.7. We were expecting 0.2. And then on orders, we got 1.1, which is great. So there are still really good signs of spending and capital investments. And even though Nvidia is, mission critical today, the consensus is it's going to be just fine. It's not a matter of if they'll beat, it's a matter of how much they'll beat. And, until you run out of people willing to buy Blackwell chips, which I don't think will be anytime soon, seems like we should be okay, knock on wood. But this gives you a little bit of an update on what's going on with the Federal Reserve and Mr. Willis.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.